This video discusses themes of trauma and describes events such as flashbacks. Please proceed with caution, and otherwise, I hope you enjoy. I'm a biology major, and something my professor told me one time really stuck with me. Yes, this has to do with PetScott, please just stay with me here. He said that in the human body, there is no left or right. For example, if you look at this nerve cell, there is no left or right side of the cell because these things exist in a 3D space. If you designate this pointy side as the left side, this cell might rotate and that definition soon becomes obsolete. But this example may be a little bit hard to understand, so let me try another one. You may remember this scene from PetScop 22, where the player is sat down in front of a counselor and they begin playing a board game. The counselor says this piece of dialogue: "Are you right-handed or left-handed?" You don't know? Really? Well, which hand do you write with? That one? That's your left hand. That means you're left-handed. I'm right-handed. I use this hand. My right is actually your left. Isn't that confusing? Anyway, your turn. The counselor and the player are sitting opposite of each other at a table. If the counselor raises their left hand, it would be on the same side as the player's right hand. What I want to emphasize here is that when something is rotated 180 degrees, left and right switch sides. The theory I'm about to dive into relies heavily on this line of thinking, the importance of perspective in relation to supposed facts, the ability to transform something without manipulating it in any way. Let's look at another example. This time I want to apply this to rotational direction. In other words, clockwise versus counterclockwise. It's difficult to distinguish a direction of rotation as explicitly left or right because when you rotate something, the top moves in one direction, but the bottom moves in the opposite direction. That's not even to mention that if you look at it from the back, it's moving in the opposite direction once more. For example, the hands of a clock move clockwise, but imagine you're holding a clock and it's facing out from you. From your perspective, those hands are moving counterclockwise. It's not unlike how the counselor's right is the player's left. But it's confusing, right? Here's a clip of Paul trying to understand this.
Clockwise, the top is going to the right, and then, the bottom is going to the left. Right? And so when someone would say, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, or, you turn this thing to the right. And I still get confused about that. Because, I know it's always the top, but, I still have to think. Well, we have the door open now, so,
I kind of want to pay attention to that last part, how apparently this logic was required to open the door of the house. You may remember that there's this running joke about how Paul can't open doors. It was present in the very first episode. This door is locked. Or not, but you don't know how to open doors. Note that it doesn't say that you can't open doors, it's you don't know how to open doors. How do you open a door anyway? You use a doorknob. You turn a doorknob. And lo and behold, there's a doorknob on this door. This is where the right versus left come into play again. Unfortunately, there's a confusing aspect to doorknobs. The direction in which you turn one to open a door depends on which side of the frame it's on. If the doorknob is on the left side of the frame, you turn it clockwise. If it's on the right side of the frame, you turn it counterclockwise. In other words, if you're trying to open a right frame doorknob by turning it clockwise, you won't be able to open the door. With this in mind, it's interesting that Paul would specifically mention the confusing nature of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, talking about turning something to the right, while musing about opening the door of the house. Hey wait, what side of the frame is the house's doorknob on? Oh, yeah, Paul, that's not right. The house's doorknob is on the right side, so you have to turn it counterclockwise, or by Paul's logic, left, to open it. He's talking about turning it to the right. Paul's 24 years old and he can't open a door. But this may not be the whole story because there's a minuscule detail that implies Paul might be right. Look at this picture of the house from PetScop 2. In this photo, the doorknob is on the left, opposite from the one actually in the game. The doorknob was switched at some point, changing the direction in which you rotate the knob to open the door. I'm not saying that there's some sort of explicit trickery going on here, but it is definitely interesting. Let's talk about Rainer, the in-universe creator of PetScop. Rainer is an interesting individual, and if you've ever seen any portion of PetScop, you can get a sense that he's undergone a significant amount of distress. He often vents about these things in his rambling musings, careless about whether or not it makes sense to his audience. There's a sense of apathy here, like he's surrendering to his own hopelessness. His filters have long since eroded away. Rayner has a tendency to assign significant meaning to seemingly arbitrary things. We see him do this with numbers a lot, insisting that odd numbers are good and even numbers are bad. He also uses colors to create a code for each member of his family and designate a certain state of being. Rayner is absolutely the type to assign this sort of meaning to rotational direction. I'd like to propose that this meaning is such. Clockwise rotation is a bit literal. It signifies progress, moving forward in time. In other words, the flow of time is natural, unobstructed. Counterclockwise rotation then functions in the opposite way. It signifies somehow moving back in time. It's delving into the past, unearthing memories. It's unnatural. It's painful. This may seem a bit unfounded at first, but let me apply this to the example that we just discussed. This is a frozen house, captured 3 times exactly as it was. The house, as it exists in the game, features a right frame doorknob. In order to open it, you need to turn the knob counterclockwise. The house is described as frozen in time. You are effectively traveling back in time when you enter the house. Meanwhile, the photograph of the house features a left frame doorknob that one would turn clockwise to open. This is a photograph. The house, as it exists here, is in a modern state in relation to the world of the photograph. In other words, there is no time travel at play here. Does this make sense? Changing the doorknob of the house when it's in its frozen state, I feel, is a very intentional decision. To be clear, I don't think that there's anything supernatural going on in Petscop. I think that it utilizes supernatural phenomenons to illustrate metaphors. No, there is not literal time travel happening in Petscop. I believe that drawing a connection between rotational direction and time in Petscop isn't that much of a stretch. Time has a huge significance in Petscop. Anachronisms have a huge significance in Petscop. There are 24 episodes of Petscop, and there are 24 hours in a day. There are 60 ticks on the dial in Room Impulse, and there are 60 minutes in an hour. There are constant images of clocks and calendars specifically functioning in confusing ways. A single event somehow takes place in multiple years. Things said only a year ago somehow exist in a game made in 1997. This clock, unlabeled, is impossible to read unless you're able to catch the second hand progressing. This way you can determine which circle is meant to be 12. Usually you'd expect 12 to be at the top. This clock, however, is rotated. It's deceptive, and when the second hand does finally progress, what happens? It doesn't progress at all. It remains stationary, while the entire clock instead moves counterclockwise. Where is the school? You can't go back in time. Yet on this road to reach the school, with a grandfather clock chiming in the background, the second hand never moves. The entire face shifts to halt the progression of time. You are stuck in time. You are going back in time. This is significant to me because the school very clearly has a foreboding aura. I don't even have to detail what happens at the school for you to understand this, it's very clear. But I would wager that if you were Carrie Mark and you were experiencing this part of the game, it would very much feel like you were being warped back in time, or like time had never progressed since that moment. This is beautifully and succinctly illustrated by this clock on the road, and that's why it's one of my favorite pieces of symbolism in Petscop. With this reading in mind, let's look at some other instances of rotation in Petscop. One of the most prominent ones is, of course, the windmill. Notice the direction it spins when unobstructed. Clockwise. It's natural. It's undisturbed. The same is true inside the windmill. Lena is spinning clockwise. You use the tool to make Lena, along with the pieces, disappear. When you fade in from black, the windmill and its gears have now reversed their direction. Without Lena, the windmill spins counterclockwise. Lena appears to be a stabilizing force. Her absence creates a warp in time. Or rather, I propose that her absence causes others to constantly look back in time. She exists only as a memory. Her disappearance makes people wonder what happened, and their minds turn back to the day that she and Marvin were at the windmill. This is echoed in the window of the birthday party behind Lena's child library room. The window shows a pinwheel on a bench, spinning counterclockwise. No Lena. To access this room, the player has to have had progressed a good amount in the game. Surely by now they've experienced several confusing and disturbing things. They're deep in the labyrinth. They're lost. However, in the soundtrack ending, we get to see the scene from the other side of the window. From here, Lena is visible, and the pinwheel next to her, though unmanipulated, is now rotating clockwise. Specifically from the back, the pinwheel is rotating clockwise. Keeping with the time theme here, this is a retrospective. You're looking back at something from the present, and from this angle, time has restored itself. In this same scene, Belle reminisces on her and Paul's past, specifically their childhood. It's a scene of retrospection. She tells a story of rebirth when they began their new life together, and after all we just went through, with the sun finally coming up and the sky turning a blinding blue, isn't it peaceful? Like you just woke up from a terrible nightmare and you're finally safe? While still steeped in the game, the pinwheel is counterclockwise. Your reward for completing the game is a clockwise pinwheel. However, nothing changed, only your position in relation to the pinwheel, to the clock, to time. You progressed in time, and now you get to look back on it from a safe future. From here, it's not as warped. Your clock is finally moving forward. This form of symbolism is also present in the generations of the game. There are 15 discs next to Anna's bed, and there are 15 generations of Petscop. The discs are incrementally rotated, starting at the bottom left and progressing from left to right, bottom to top. The 8th disc makes a different pitch zooming noise than the others. This is called Zoom Here in the sound effects list. It signifies your current location. At this point, Paul is in Gen 8. 8 is perfectly halfway between 1 and 15. Since the discs make one full 360-degree rotation, the 8th disc is the halfway point of rotation. This disc is rotated 180 degrees. Imagine you place a disc in a PlayStation console. From the front, the disc spins clockwise. From the back, the position shown in the Gen 8 disc is spinning counterclockwise. Paul is currently in a counterclockwise state. He's currently experiencing events from the past. He's currently traveling back in time. With this in mind, I think it's interesting how Paul gets his lefts and rights mixed up.
We can see what the room looks like in that recording. On the right side, there's a windmill.
The very same switching of left and right direction is present in other parts of the series, such as when Marvin's controls are swapped. Additionally, in the Quitter's room, the reflection imitates up and down movement verbatim, while left and right movement are swapped, as is the nature of a horizontal reflection. Spinning itself is also extremely prominent in Petscop. Care is described as spinning over and over when Rainer went over to help Anna paint the house. For some reason, as he watched her spin, Rainer was stunned by pure horror and disgust. He notes her degrees of rotation, but how do we know what direction she was spinning in? In geometry, if the degrees of rotation are positive, rotation occurs in a counterclockwise direction. There you go. Anyway, there's many more instances of rotation throughout the series, but I don't want to detail them all here. Hopefully, with this new reading in mind, you can notice some other patterns of rotation within the series and draw your own conclusions as to what they mean. For now, I want to leave you with a riddle that Rainer presents to Marvin. This windmill vanished off the face of the earth. Here's a similar puzzle. For you, Marvin. There are 2 pictures of a door. In the first picture, the door is closed. In the second picture, taken later, the door is open. Nobody opened the door. The door did not open itself. The door, in fact, did not open at all. What happened?